Hello and welcome to Sunshine for Your Life. You know, I've always loved the study of weather, the study of meteorology, and I like to get up and watch the storms, and I even like to be in a storm because I like to experience. Sometimes we can get hurricanes in this part of the country, not very often, and not to the devastation that we have seen in the west and the south this year. But I do like to be in a hurricane a little bit when it comes, and sometimes we do get it. When I was a child, I would go out in a storm just to see and feel it. And I would sit on our porch and I would watch what was happening and see the storm come up. And I wanted to see and feel the impact of the storm just to experience it. One time I was sitting on our porch experiencing a hurricane. We had actually had a hurricane that came up this far north, so I was able to be in it. My father came out and sat with me because he was also curious about the weather and he didn't want me sitting out there alone. And I was fascinated with the high winds and the pounding rain and everything that you experience in the wind of the hurricane. Then suddenly there was a huge, huge, huge banging sound. I can't even describe it. It was terribly, terribly loud. And we saw it, and we saw a tree that had been lifted up from our neighbor's house, and it was floating sideways down the street, roots and all. What had happened was the hurricane had somehow lifted the tree out of the ground, roots and all, put it in the air by several feet, tipped it on its side, and then it was floating down the street and ahead of us, and we had to look up to see it, floating right down the street in front of us. And my father at that point said, "I think we should go in, don't you, Pat?" And I agreed, and we went in where my relieved mother was waiting for us. What a tremendous amount of power that a storm has. Now, we can report the weather, but we can't control it. I've read a lot of articles in terms of what we can do to control the weather, how to redirect a storm, how to seed the clouds so we can get more rain, but it really doesn't amount to much because we can't control what nature does. We can, however, pray to God in a storm, and He can answer our prayers by redirecting the storm or stopping the storm completely. Jesus said, "Peace, be still," to a storm in the Sea of Galilee, and the storm stopped and the water became calm. I have been by the Sea of Galilee when a storm came up, and the winds tunnel through the mountain passes, and you can have a terrible, terrible windstorm. The wind howls, and it can be ferocious. It's no wonder that anyone who is in a fishing boat would fear for their lives. I've been on fishing boats on the Sea of Galilee, crossing the Sea of Galilee, and any kind of a fierce windstorm would be very frightening to a fisherman. Mark describes a storm like that on the Sea of Galilee, so I'm going to read Mark 4, verses 37 through 40, and this is what it says. "A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drown?' He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, 'Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?'" Verse 41 continues and says that the disciples were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." As a matter of fact, Mark 4:41 says, "Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him." When we were by the Sea of Galilee, the storm came up and the wind howled loudly. The desk of the hotel was manned 24 hours a day. They reacted like nothing was going on. They were used to it. People came and went. They didn't even react to it at all because they were used to it. There was no rain. It was completely a windstorm, and it was totally wind and nothing else. And the next morning, it was calm, but the wind howled all night. Now, we have many storms in our lives. Things happen, tragedies occur, and we are left wondering what we are going to do and how we are going to manage. But God always has the answer. Hebrews 13:5-6 says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So we can say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? I would like to read that again. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So we can say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? And Hebrews 10:35 says, do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. The Bible goes on to say that you need to persevere, so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. And then in verse 39 of Hebrews 10, it says, but we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who believe and are saved. Let me read that again. We are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who believe and are saved. No matter what the storm of life is that you are going through, God is with you in it, and he will direct you in terms of what you need to do, where you need to go, so you can get through the storm safely. You don't have to fear. Now, I do quite a bit of driving, and a few years back, I was driving from Maine to New Hampshire, and I had a friend of mine with me. Often, as soon as we passed the New Hampshire border, a terrible rainstorm came up. It was so fierce that no one could drive. I pulled over to the side of the road, or what I thought was the side of the road, because I couldn't see it. No one could see anything. The rain was pounding. All you could see and hear was rain. And I waited. After a period of time, the rain slowed down, and we could see police cars around us. There were police everywhere. There were branches down, parts of trees had fallen down. We never heard or saw any of this, and it looked like there was devastation. We didn't hear it, we didn't see it, then we didn't hear any police sirens, but the police were there, and branches and parts of trees were down on the road. And the miracle was that nothing fell on our car. And there was an open path for our car to drive through, so police guided us through that open path, and we went on our way completely unharmed. But there were branches everywhere. Later on, we found out that we either had a downburst or a small tornado. And so we may have driven through and stopped in the middle of a small tornado. But we were safe, so God does protect you in the storm. And if he's going to protect you in the storms physically, he'll protect you in the storms in your life. So don't be afraid of the storms in your life. God will get you through them. You can always survive and move forward, for he will never leave you nor forsake you. And I'm going to close with this psalm, part of this psalm. It's Psalm 107, verse 29 and 30, but I'm going to read it twice, but I'll close with this also. It says this, he stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad when it grew calm. Again, he guided them to their desired haven. So let me read that again. He stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad when it grew calm, and he guided them to their desired haven. So no matter what kind of a situation that you're in your life, which feels like a storm to you, and it may be horrible, but even if it's horrible, God can still guide you and get you through it. Remember, he is the good shepherd. He leads his sheep. He doesn't drive them, but he does lead them. And so therefore you can rely upon him to get you through the storms in your life. So I'm going to close it here, and we'll do something else next week. Please join me then.